Some of Federalist 63 hasn't aged very well, but you know what? It's still my favourite Federalist paper, and when Savannah asked me if there was a guest slot that I would like in her wonderful series on the Federalist Papers, I jumped at the chance to talk about Federalist 63. I said some of it hasn't aged very well because some of it implies, or pretty much says explicitly if we're honest, that there are some people in society that make better decisions than others, and that's because in the 18th century they really did think that if you'd had a good education, that you really did probably make better decisions than other people, and that doesn't always align very well with modern ideas about democratic thought. But let's try and put that to one side and focus on one of the real innovations of Federalist 63 that tells us something incredibly profound about Madison's theory of popular government. There are many ways you could justify the Senate, and other parts of the Federalist Papers perhaps advance arguments that are more familiar to us. Maybe the Senate balances the interests of large and small states. But whatever other arguments there are in favour of the Senate, Federalist 63 presents Madison's theory of popular government in its most succinct and clearest form as a way of justifying the very unusual arrangements for the US Senate, its long terms of office, its strange mode of election, and so on. Madison, in Federalist 63, is grappling with one of the great problems of Republican theorists. When and why should you give the people what they want? After all, popular governments and electorates do not always do sensible things. Should you really give them what they ask for, when some of the things that democracies have asked for in the past have been incredibly unjust? Didn't the people of Athens condemn Socrates to death or commit other crimes and then regret their choices? It's not always helpful to say that just because a majority wants something, they should have it. And you can't always protect against bad decisions by writing bills of rights. Sometimes you have to think about, well, how do I protect the people against errors that they may wish to make? Madison, in Federalist 63, comes up with what I think is one of the best answers to this problem. But it's an answer that rests on some theories of human nature that are perhaps not obvious and are now a little bit alien to us. Madison thinks that when people are being reasonable, when they are thinking calmly, when they are thinking logically, they will probably come to good solutions. He does not think that being emotional about a subject, that being passionate about a subject, is a good thing. He thinks that emotions and passion cloud our judgments. And so his solution for democratic error, as he expresses it in Federalist 63, is to make sure, if he can, that decisions are being made on a reasonable basis. Now, he's already suggested one way of trying to achieve this in Federalist 10. He suggests in Federalist 10, and it was a real innovation for the time, that making the state bigger makes it less likely that the whole nation will be gripped in one moment by the kinds of passion that are destructive in politics and lead to bad decisions. In Federalist 63, he suggests another solution, which rests on his idea that emotions, if they're strong, will burn themselves out. And therefore, if you allow a decision to be made over a more extended period of time, it is more likely, Madison thinks, that it will be reasonable. And he's trying to balance in Federalist 63 the demands to have a government that is genuinely controlled by the people, but his hope that what the people ask for will be reasonable and just. And so he presents the Senate with its 6-year terms and with its provision that only a third of it can be changed in any election year, as a way of guarding the people against errors that they might in an instant want to make. And all of that is very powerfully presented in a few sentences. Madison writes, "To a people as little corrupted by flattery as those whom I address," he means the electorate of New York, "I shall not scruple to add that a Senate may sometimes be necessary as a defense to the people against their own temporary errors and delusions. Although the will of the people ought, in all governments, and ultimately will, in all free governments, prevail over the views of rulers, so there are moments in public affairs when the people, stimulated by some unusual passion, or misled by the artful representations of interested men, may call for measures which they will afterwards be the most ready to lament and condemn. And in those moments, how salutary, how useful, will be the interference of some temperate, it is not emotional, and respectable body of citizens that will check the blow meditated by the people against themselves." It's a remarkable contribution to democratic theory. It's one of my favourite ideas in the Federalist Papers. It's an idea which, when you start looking for it, cascades through a lot of Madison's thought. And I think it really does help us to reflect on what is good and what is bad decision making. Now, of course, there are problems with it, and Madison doesn't quite address these. Because you might think, as Madison does, that injustice is likely if you take hasty action, because you might be acting on emotion. But if you delay decisions too long, you can also delay justice. That is one of the tensions that any writer of a constitution is going to have to deal with. But I think next time somebody says the words checks and balances to you as a descriptor of what the US Constitution is all about, try not to think about hard limits that Madison has drawn around decisions that the American people will make, because Madison didn't believe in drawing those hard limits. Madison believed that ultimately, if the people kept saying that they wanted something, they would get it. But he also hoped that if they kept saying they wanted something over a long period of time, that what they wanted would be the result of reasoned discussion and proper logical debate, not some kind of passionate reaction that would lead them astray. I think that's a rather profound and wonderful idea, and I'm very grateful to Savannah for letting me talk about it. We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming.